I'm Caroline Hyde, in for Emily Chang. This is Bloomberg Technology. Coming up, another August, another lackluster jobs report for the 7th time in a row. What did today's snapshot reveal about the state of the US economy and the future of jobs in tech? We'll get the big picture from a top Google and eBay recruiter. Plus, the Dara Khosrowshahi regime officially begins Tuesday. But is the board truly behind Uber's new direction and the new man behind the wheel? We'll get answers from an early investor. And after not one but two Bloomberg scoops on Apple's most significant launch event to date, the beginning of a new era for Whole Foods and Uber finally naming Travis Kalanick's successor, we'll run through the biggest stories this week in tech. But first, some breaking news for you. Roku is filing for an initial public offering, registering right now for at least $100 million. Details just coming across the Bloomberg. Their company also discloses revenue of $200 million for the 6 months ended June 30th, and they intend to list on the NASDAQ. We'll have more details as we get them. It's been reported that they could seek a valuation of as much as $1 billion for the streaming device maker. Now, let's get to the latest jobs report out of the United States for you. Job growth slowed in August with a lower than projected 156,000 jobs, with the unemployment rate ticking up to 4.4%. Now, the data was less positive than other recent months, with momentum slowing in a few sectors. This at a time when the U.S. labor force is under closer scrutiny than usual because of, well, President Trump's America First hiring agenda. Joining us now to discuss is Rishan Bloomberg. He is co-founder in 10X Management, a recruitment firm that hires the likes of Google, the likes of eBay. Rishan, great to have you on as ever. And talk to us about these numbers. We're seeing sluggishness, unsurprising for the month of August, it would seem. But what did you see in your area in technology?
So, technology remains to be strong. I think overall, the thing that I'm taking away from this report is that the unemployment rate is still very low, which is great. The thing that's sort of behind those numbers that's a little bit more concerning is that wages are really stagnant. So we see the wage rate at 2.5%, which I think is still above inflation, but it's below where the housing market's at. So I think our employees are losing a little bit as wages stagnate.
Yeah, and this is productivity seems to not be going very fast anywhere. We saw wage gains of just 0.1% on a month-on-month basis. But interestingly, you're talking now of an imminent and massive job loss crisis due to automation and AI. I wonder, are we already seeing this in the numbers? Is that why wage inflation isn't going anywhere, because of the threat of a robot taking your job? Or wouldn't we be seeing more productivity?
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. I think that is sort of baked into these numbers. The fact that that rate is so low, and also that the participation rate is only 62.9%, which is equivalent to like El Salvador and the Ukraine. So what we're seeing in the market is there just aren't as many people in the labor market in general, and some of that has to do with automation for sure. And we've launched this website called The Day After Labor, which is really to focus the best and the brightest minds and lawmakers on really addressing this issue of impending automation job loss that we could see globally, and that will be pretty massive. I don't want to sort of scream that the sky is falling because this isn't today and tomorrow, but this is happening already, and it's going to increase over the next 5 to 10 and 20 years.
I mean, Oxford University here in the UK said that about 47%, so what, half of US jobs could eventually be automated in the next 2 decades. When you say massive, what sort of numbers are you talking about?
Those kinds of numbers. I mean, those are huge, unprecedented numbers. That's close to 50% of the workforce being completely eliminated, as in no more jobs for them. So what happens? What do we do to keep people out of poverty? And more importantly, or maybe not more importantly, but equally important, what do people do with all of their time? So really what we're trying to do is just focus attention on this sort of looming huge issue globally.
So you're launching this petition, new website to raise awareness. But what do you expect to be talked about in terms of the policy arena, in terms of preserving, helping people that will find themselves out of a job? What do you want to be on the table?
Look, I think that is the million-dollar question, billion-dollar question, is what are some options here? There are a few things that are being talked about. There's universal basic income, which is effectively a base income that everybody would earn to keep them out of poverty. Those are some of the negative aspects of job loss due to automation. Some of the positive aspects are the fact that consumer prices will be incredibly low because of the efficiencies that we'll see in the economy. So if we can find a way to keep people at some sort of a base level of earnings, I think quality of life as far as cost of goods and things like that will be reduced significantly due to the efficiencies. The next question is, what do people do? What are we going to have people doing when they're not working?
And what about the company's role in all of this? I remember at the beginning of the year there was talk flagged by Bill Gates that we tax the robots. But should companies be coming in and helping those that they're likely to be axing? Yeah,
I mean, look, this is a massive problem that is going to have a public and private solution. I do think that governments are going to have to play a massive role here. But yes, I think both companies and charities alike will have to sort of step into the role to fill any gaps that there might be. And I do think there's a responsibility that companies will bear by increasing efficiency and decreasing human labor. Yes, there's going to have to be some sort of contribution and a sort of a system that is just different from what we're used to over the last 100, 150 years.
So fascinating call to arms that you're making at 10X, but talk to us about the here and now with 10X management, about what skills are being demanded of you by the likes of Google, eBay, the tech giants that you serve, and perhaps where people might be wanting to go into to protect themselves from this mass unemployment that you envisage.
Yeah, I mean, look, one area that I think is going to continue to be robust is definitely going to be tech, because we currently have fewer tech specialists than there are tech needs, both domestically and abroad. So as long as you are focused on STEM education and retraining for technology positions, I think we're going to see that market continue to be strong for the long term. And right now, I think we're finding that it's much like the economy right now. Tech needs are very robust because there's just a supply and demand imbalance in that sector.
Rishan Bloomberg, always great to get your opinion. Thank you very much. Co-founder of 10X Management. Great to have you joining us. Now, the White House has announced that President Trump will make a decision about the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program, known as DACA, next week. Now, the program allows people who entered the United States illegally as children to apply for renewable 2-year work permits that shield them from deportation. The news comes as hundreds of business leaders, including tech titans Tim Cook and Jeff Bezos, signed an open letter to the president and congressional leadership defending the program. It's a story that we'll discuss later this hour, so do stay tuned. Meanwhile, coming up, just last week, Vanguard and T. Rowe Price reduced their valuations on Uber. But one early investor called the move completely irrelevant. We'll hear from Mitchell Green from Lead Edge Capital next. And Bloomberg Technology is live streaming on Twitter. Check us out. Why don't you at Bloomberg Tech TV weekdays, 5 p.m. New York, 2 p.m. San Francisco, 10 p.m. right here in London. This is Bloomberg. Now, Alphabet is forming a new holding company called 26, but written in the Roman numerals XXV1. Now, the unit will legally separate Google from other units such as Waymo and Verily, a medical device and data firm. 26 Holdings will reorganize Alphabet as a corporate parent and complete the separation from Google. Now, as we've been reporting this week, Uber has a new leader. Dara Khosrowshahi, former chief executive of Expedia, is now charged with cleaning up Uber after the resignation of former CEO Travis Kalanick. So how are Uber investors feeling about the board's CEO selection? Well, Bloomberg Markets covered this topic with Lead Edge Capital founding partner Mitchell Green, an early investor in the startup. Take a listen.
I'm sure he will be involved in some way. He's obviously built a $35 billion, GMV juggernaut, growing super fast, and I'm sure Dara wants him involved in some capacity.
Now, things obviously turned a little sour between Kalanick and Benchmark, another early investor. How about you guys? What are relations like between Lead Edge and Kalanick?
So, look, I do not know the Travis well. We invested much later than Benchmark. I wish I was as smart as them and had invested when they did. And I am sure, given time, we and lots of other shareholders, want that all to settle down and settle. And I'm sure, given time, it will all become past news.
Mitchell, how soon are we going to get the IPO then?
Dara came out and said 18 to 36 months. We've always kind of been of the impression it was a 2019, 2020 IPO. We're in no rush for them to go public. We were a investor in Alibaba Group, first investing in like 2009, 2010, and they were a private company for 15 years almost before they went public. And so we're in no rush. It is nice to see Dara come out though and put a timeline on it. I think that will calm a lot of investor nerves.
Mitchell, I mean, this week's all been about, can he do it? What are the challenges he faces? Comparing his challenges at Expedia to what he's going to face at Uber. What's his number 1 and 2 challenge, and what's going to be the most difficult to address?
He needs to build here, and I think he will, and I think he has a lot of experience, and I don't think it's probably appreciated as much how similar the global ride-sharing business is and the global OTA travel business is. But the first thing he's got to do is build a world-class team. We have heard from numerous tech executives that he is a great leader, and I think the list is long of people who would love to work with him on this rocket ship. He came out and said he thinks this is an opportunity of a lifetime. So I think, one, he needs to build out the leadership team, which he will. It'll just take time. And two, he needs to, I think, figure out his international strategy. Does he do more deals in other areas of the world like they did in China or in Russia? And then three, I think they need to figure out what their long-term, autonomous strategy is. Do they go at it alone? Do they partner with other people? I have no idea, but I think these are things that he's going to be focused on. But I think it's really important to realize how similar the global ride-sharing business is versus the travel, like the travel business. Because if you are Expedia and you're competing in Europe against Booking.com, which is a large majority of Priceline's value in the marketplace, think about it. Priceline may be lowering prices one day in Brussels, raising them in Prague, keeping them flat in Paris, and spiking them because are lowering them dramatically in Barcelona where the weather's bad. That same kind of thing happens in ride sharing, and so I think there's actually a lot of similarities between the two business models.
How concerned are you about valuations right now, though, quite apart from even leadership, as much as that plays into it? We saw recently another fund marked down its Uber holding. Are you concerned that perhaps Uber isn't as valuable as it once was?
That's completely irrelevant. It makes good headlines. We would be aggressive buyers at prices people have talked about today. I'll put it an example. A couple big mutual funds marked their values down, but I think it was BlackRock that actually marked it up to like $53 a share from the last round to 48. And this stuff is all noise. Our view is very fundamental. What is this thing? What can this thing generate in 3 to 5 years on an earnings basis? At, a 20 to 30 times multiple, looking out 3+ years. We think it can be conservatively a $100 to $150 billion company, and but great companies have tails, and it's possible that it's a $200 billion company. It doesn't surprise us at all that Moss and SoftBank and General Atlantic and Dragonair want to invest at these prices.
Yeah,
which has been, obviously
Mitchell,
talked about in the news.
You're clearly somebody who spots fantastic companies. Spotify, Refinery 29. These are all investments in your portfolio. Tile, another one, Waymo, Wayfair. So not Waymo, Wayfair, I should say. But so you obviously have a good eye. But I'm wondering what gives you such confidence that Uber will be profitable so soon? It's still reporting losses in the hundreds of millions of dollars, even as bookings are up.
So let's not forget that two other companies that have spent billions of dollars building their businesses and are still burning billions of dollars are Tesla and Netflix. And so these companies are also burning tons of money, and let's not forget Uber is growing much faster than them. I am very, very confident that Uber's business will be nicely profitable and is a very sustainable business.
That was Lead Edge Capital founding partner Mitchell Green there. Now coming up, we'll cover a developing story. Roku filing for an IPO. Can the move help the company break out in the crowded streaming market? We'll discuss next. And a reminder of our interactive TV function. You can find it at TV Go on the Bloomberg. You can watch us live. If you miss an interview, you can go back to it. You can send our producers a message, play along with the charts we bring you on air. This is for Bloomberg subscribers only. Check it out at TV Go. This is Bloomberg. Bitcoin's big year got even bigger today. The top name in cryptocurrencies crossed $4,800 for the first time ever. That means that since the start of the year, Bitcoin's value has jumped more than 350%. And it's not the only cryptocurrency nearing a record high. Its main rival, Ether, climbed to just below $400. The total value of the cryptocurrency market is now at over $175 billion. Now back to our developing story. Roku is filing for an IPO with an initial registration of at least $100 million. Details are just coming in about the latest move for one of the pioneers in streaming media. Let's go now to Los Angeles, where joining us to discuss is Bloomberg's Lucas Shaw. Reports that we could see a valuation of as much as $1 billion. What are you thinking for this streaming particular company?
Well, Roku has held up fairly well in a market where it's competing with three of the biggest tech companies in the world, or three of the biggest companies, Apple, Amazon, and Google. You know, Roku came out of Netflix once upon a time. This was a box that they were developing, that they were going to use to deliver their service. But Netflix is all about focus, 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 so they spun this thing out, and it has been one of the earliest in its space and continues to grow. I think there's a report just this week that it is still the largest set-top box in the market.
I mean, what's fascinating is the timing. I mean, we're getting numbers in terms of revenue, sure, $200 million in the last 6 months to June, but it's still posting a loss. And, well, we've seen how the market's digested previous IPOs. We've seen Snap not always being that profitable and being a worry. Do you think it's interesting timing?
Yeah, well, the challenge for Roku is really what is the long-term business? You know, it's a great utility. It's something that offers you all of these different services. And they made a point in their filing of comparing themselves to an MVPD, which is like a Comcast or a DirecTV or pay TV provider. But unlike those companies, which you pay a monthly fee for whatever they're giving you, and then they work out the deals with, you know, CBS, NBC, so on and so forth, there are not a lot of the major players with whom I think Roku is taking like a big fee. You're not paying Roku for your Netflix or your Hulu. So how they're going to be a company that generates a ton of revenue and is profitable is a little bit unclear to me. In terms of the timing, you know, I feel like Roku has been out there as a company that could get bought, sold, go public for a while. You know, having this filing on a Friday before a holiday weekend is also somewhat unusual. We'll wait and see.
We will indeed. I want to get your expertise on the streaming in general environment, because we had some pretty stellar numbers coming out of a European juggernaut, none other than Vivendi, which owns Universal Music Group. And it looks as though music streaming is starting to be a cash cow for these music companies.
Yeah, Spotify and Apple Music have revived an industry that many had left for dead even just a year or two ago. But we've had the recorded music industry post growth 2 years in a row, which had not happened since the peak of the CD boom. There was a particularly enthusiastic report from Goldman Sachs this week that came out that projected that the industry would, grow to be $30-something billion, and there'd be 700 or 800 million people paying for music come 2030. That may be a bit much. Most of the people I've spoken with this week feel it was excessive. It's an enthusiasm. They're still in the early stages of a recovery, but all signs are pointing in the right direction. You've seen Vivendi post very solid numbers. You've seen Warner Music Group post very solid numbers. And Spotify, though it is still losing money, has just registered incredible growth in consumers and in revenue.
I think it's quite amazing, yeah, that growth story being posted by Goldman Sachs and the focus on emerging markets in particular. What's also nicely linking with Roku is not just the streaming, but also the IPO story. And there's still talk of Universal Music Group IPOing in the US. That's something that we're getting a few tidbits on.
Yeah, I believe our colleagues in Europe had reported on this. There's been a lot of discussion about what exactly will happen with Universal. Whether they will file for an IPO in the U.S., whether they sell off a piece of it, whether they sell the whole thing. Because the value of Universal is going up and up and up, Vivendi is sitting on this very valuable asset, and I think Vincent Bolloré, the CEO, is trying to figure out what's the best way to maximize it.
And, I mean, as if we couldn't have yet more streaming news, but there is Tencent Music Entertainment. I mean, it looks as though they're getting some new funding ahead of a potential IPO for their music streaming part of the business.
Yeah, well, China is one of the best semi-untold stories in the music business. You know, the amount of money that's being generated from music sales in China has more than doubled in just the past 4 years. It's now more than $200 million. And as with all things, streaming and media, the established players like Spotify and Apple Music have a hard time there. Spotify's not in China. Apple Music is there, but the really big player is the one that you just talked about, Tencent, which has deals with all of the major labels, and they are all incredibly enthusiastic and bullish as to where that industry is headed. Much as the video streaming market in China has taken off, as the movie box office sales have taken off in China, music seems to be the next one that's ripe for growth. And so you see a company in Tencent seeing an opportunity to get some money for it.
Lucas, you've given us a whistle-stop tour through all things streaming and IPOing. Lucas Shaw, thank you very much for joining us. Now coming up, what's the appetite for Apple's new iPhones? And how does the company know if consumers will be willing to pay up for a 3D camera? We discuss with This Week in Tech. This is Bloomberg.
I'm Mark Crumpton in New York. You're watching Bloomberg Technology. Let's begin with a check of First Word News. President Trump on Friday signed a proclamation establishing Sunday as a day of prayer for those dealing with the aftermath of Hurricane Harvey. The president returns to Texas Saturday and is also expected to stop in Louisiana. House Speaker Paul Ryan's urging the president to fix, not end, the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. The announcement is expected next week. Democratic Congressman Raul Grijalva says ending the program is the wrong move.
It has not been a drain. It has not been something that has cost the United States anything in terms of government cost. On the contrary, it has been a boon and a plus in terms of the economic vitality of this nation. It has been a contributor.
The German Chancellor Angela Merkel and her center-left opponent Martin Schulz square off Sunday in the only TV debate of the German election campaign. Schulz hopes the debate increases his chances with just over 3 weeks to go. Polls have Merkel's party ahead by at least 12 points. The Associated Press reports smoke was seen coming from the chimney at the Russian consulate in San Francisco on Friday. The Trump administration recently ordered the closing of the consulate and other Russian-affiliated offices in Washington and New York. It's retaliation for the Kremlin's demand last month that the U.S. substantially reduce the size of its diplomatic staff in Russia. Kenya's incumbent President Uhuru Kenyatta says he's ready to campaign again, and he told reporters it's time to get back to work. He spoke in Nairobi after the court nullified last month's election and called for a new vote within 60 days.
I respect it. I disagree with it because, as I have said, millions of Kenyans queued, made their choice, and 6 people have decided that they will go against the will of the people.
Security forces in Colombia have killed one of its most wanted drug fugitives, the alleged second in charge of a ruthless criminal network that arose from disbanded right-wing paramilitary groups to become the nation's longest drug trafficking organization. Roberto Vargas, best known by his alias The Hawk, was killed in an operation conducted by an elite commando unit near his base in northern Colombia. Authorities had ordered a $165,000 U.S. bounty. At a news conference with his generals, Colombian President Juan Manuel Santos said of Vargas, quote, "This was one of our most sought targets. We have been on his trail for a long time." Global news 24 hours a day, powered by more than 2,700 journalists around the globe. I'm Mark Crumpton. This is Bloomberg.
This is Bloomberg Technology. I'm Caroline Hyde. Now, after conducting a CEO search for most of the summer, Uber tapped Expedia's chief executive, Dara Khosrowshahi, to take the helm at the world's biggest startup. Since then, Uber's board put on a show of unity while Khosrowshahi discussed IPO plans. So, is it all smooth sailing after a tumultuous year? We discussed this topic with Bloomberg Technology Senior Executive Editor Brad Stone and with Bloomberg Tech Startups reporter Eric Newcomer as we recapped This Week in Tech.
Dara, at his all hands earlier in the week, where he put on what Eric just called in his newsletter today a show of unity with former CEO Travis Kalanick. He talked about 18 to 36 months. It's basically like, give us some time, give us some breathing room. And I think he did a good job, at least attempting to close the book on this turbulent chapter in Uber's history, saying, talking about transparency, talking about the values that had gotten them this far and how they weren't going to be able to carry them to the next phase. I mean, Uber, has a lot of baggage that it has to resolve, including 2 Justice Department investigations. But so far, I think Dara is off to a pretty good start.
Yeah, and Eric, I mean, you are the man who is on this story beat by bit, blow by blow, and talk to us about the unity we saw displayed, but also the infighting that continues, particularly at board level. We had that astonishing letter written by Shevin Pishevar earlier in the week, and how is that being digested by Benchmark Capital versus Travis Kalanick?
Right. Travis Kalanick, Arianna Huffington, Ryan Graves, they were all at Uber's board meeting Wednesday, sort of almost figuratively hand in hand with Dara Khosrowshahi, the new CEO. And, he acknowledged to employees, some of the length of time for the search and everything like that. But he sort of joked, this is the best board. How could I not say that? They picked me. So it was definitely a very positive message, even when it came to Travis, sort of recognizing that he built the company to where it is today. But then, like you said, Benchmark is still suing Travis. Now, that case has moved to arbitration, but the conflict between, 2 of Uber's board members is ongoing. So that issue is still live, and the substance behind the fight, just how bad was the company under Travis Kalanick, and what does the company need to do move on from that? I think that's a debate that's still being had among employees and board members as well.
Brad, any update on the next set of senior executives that we might see added to Uber? Because, of course, the priorities have got to be for the new CEO, well, to get himself a CFO, let alone some other key executives.
Yeah, I think that's it, Caroline. Uber needs a CFO. They lost more than $600 million in the last quarter. Dara might even hire a COO, someone to go and, maybe help cut costs, a strategic partner to look at all the places in the world where Uber is really just hemorrhaging money and up against some very well-funded indigenous competitors and figure out where to pull back and where to invest. So, this is, one of, I think, Travis's weaknesses, and he had many strengths, was that he kind of hoarded control and he didn't hire aggressively. And so this is a management team whose ranks have been considerably thinned, and Dara certainly has to address that.
So plenty on the plate of Uber's new CEO, plenty to get excited about for September the 12th. Eric, talk to us about what the hype is like in San Francisco ahead of the all-important 10th anniversary phone we're getting from Apple, and all importantly, where it's going to be launched.
Right. There are just such high expectations for Apple's new premium phone, and then sort of the 2 other versions, and just to see what's coming. And then we have, Apple TV, the watch. There are just a lot of categories. And given that this is the 10-year anniversary of the iPhone, there's just huge expectations. And then, you're referencing that the announcement to the media, come visit us here, come see it at Apple, and sort of learn about sort of the new devices that we have in store.
Can I add to that, though, Carol? Let me add to that, though. It just feels like every year we treat this event as like the Super Bowl of tech, and companies like Samsung and Xiaomi and Huawei release their phones with a lot of the same features, with a lot less fanfare. And yes, it's September 12th, and yes, it's at Apple's new campus, the Steve Jobs Theater, and it's maybe it's the 10th anniversary of the iPhone. And it's, of course, an important phone around the world, but it is a phone with a minority of market share. And I don't know, I think sometimes we get a little overheated with the hype around Apple's product events, which are in effect press conferences.
Apple, hype, queues, who'd have thought it, I have to say. Yeah, it is one that we've got to throw it out to some of the other tech competitors out there, and they try and build up some of their events too. I want to take it to another key company, Brad, that you've written a book on as well. It's Amazon. They were all over the press this week as well, and it's all about finally they've got their grips on Whole Foods, and they are slashing the prices. Those avocados are coming straight down.
That's right. I mean, they did the first task, which is, all eyes were on Whole Foods. They cut prices on some very visible items, and I think in the public perception, they kind of attacked head on this idea that Whole Foods was exorbitantly expensive. I mean, it still is when you compare those products to supermarkets like Walmart and Kroger's. But all the hard work remains. I mean, this is Amazon's largest acquisition ever. It hasn't been a particularly good acquirer of companies that it then integrates into its core business. We still have to see how Prime membership, what it looks like as the loyalty program for Whole Foods. Can they do things at the point of sale, introduce technologies that make the checkout at Whole Foods a little less arduous, and can they put Whole Foods products into the Amazon supply chain so that we could either deliver them to our homes or do curbside pickup? I mean, this is we think of Amazon as a leader in the grocery category. I can't say this, enough. Walmart is way ahead. It's much easier. Now those are different customer sets, but Amazon has its work cut out for it.
My conversation earlier with Bloomberg's Brad Stone and Eric Newcomer. Meanwhile, hundreds of CEOs and business leaders across the United States are urging President Trump to keep the Dreamers program. Now, this prevents the deportation of young people brought to the country illegally. Apple CEO Tim Cook, Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos, and Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella are among those who signed a letter claiming that Dreamers are vital to the future of our companies and our economy. Now, this afternoon, the White House clarified that Trump will make a final decision next week, on Tuesday, in fact. For more, I want to bring in Bloomberg Technology Executive Editor Tom Giles in San Francisco. Tom, remind us why tech leaders such as Tim Cook and Jeff Bezos would speak so passionately about this.
Well, there's a lot of reasons why it's an important issue to the technology industry. One, a lot of the tech companies, a lot of the biggest tech companies in the world are run by immigrants or the children of immigrants. So this hits home in a very personal way. A lot of these companies also employ lots of immigrants. Microsoft itself, Microsoft said that it estimates there are about 27 of its staff are affected by the DACA program. So there's a couple of reasons right off the top. Thirdly, just in terms of the business case for this, they talk about the fact that this would, if this is done away with, this could cost the GDP of this country $460 billion. This would be $26 billion in lost Medicare and tax benefits that are collected from these people. People who come to this country as young children, grow up, become part of the education program, they join the workforce, they're buying homes, cars, they're starting businesses. That's the argument of these business leaders who are very vociferously trying to get the Trump administration to back down.
I mean, 350 of them signing, Tom. It's quite amazing.
Right.
It seems like there's yet another ability, though, to strike back at Donald Trump. It seems as though the voice is growing and the willingness to show their opposition is still there. Is this something that you're feeling very fervently in San Francisco?
Well, definitely. I mean, you saw more and more people. Intel was one of the earliest in this most recent wave to jump off one of the councils. Ultimately, those were disbanded. They voted to disband it. Trump came in and disbanded before it could the final stages. But clearly, corporate America is losing patience with Donald Trump or his policies in particular. And they're more willing to be vocal about it. Now, the question is, do they have less leverage given that they're not on the councils? They don't have that proverbial seat at the table that you keep hearing about.
And Trump, of course, to respond Tuesday, we understand.
That's right. I mean, this is an administration that's gone back and forth about where he stands on the Dreamers, the so-called Dreamers. Early on there was criticism during the campaign. Later there was a bit of a softer stance. We're going to go softer on the Dreamers. And more recently, this speculation that it may be done away with. We understand that once that executives from Microsoft, to name one company, have made a direct appeal to the White House, and we're definitely burning the phone lines to find out who else is doing what to keep this from happening. And if it does happen, what happens then? I mean, can you imagine, cameras in the engineering department of Microsoft or Google, as these people are being hauled off? If it comes to that, I'm projecting a very possible scenario. But could you imagine what that looks like for Google, what that looks like for the Trump administration?
An emotive subject for sure. Ton Giles, great to get your opinion as ever. Thank you very much, live from San Francisco for us. Now, Apple is shaking up its leadership for Siri. Software head Craig Federighi will now oversee that Apple department. Services chief Eddie Q was in charge of Siri, along with iTunes, Apple Music, Maps and iCloud. Now, he's taken on more responsibility with the addition of video content creation team that may form the basis of a new streaming service for the iPhone maker. Apple is facing increased competition in the voice-activated assistance arena with the likes of Amazon's Echo and Google's Home product. Now coming up, Panasonic unveiled its first hi-fi smart speaker. Why the electronics maker decided to link up with Google for its latest device. That's next, and this is Bloomberg. Now, the maker of a $400 juice machine, Juicero, is closing up shop. The startup that raised more than $100 million from investors including GV and Josh Kushner's Thrive Capital said it will suspend sales, offer refunds to customers and search for a buyer for the company. The decision to shut down comes 4 months after a Bloomberg News report showed that the company's juice packets could be squeezed by hand and didn't require Juicero's costly machine. The machine had previously sold for $700 before they cut the price tag. Now, Panasonic has launched its first hi-fi smart speaker with Google Assistant built in. Earlier, I caught up with Panasonic Europe CEO Laurent Abadi from Berlin. I started by asking, why they decided to link up with Google on their latest speaker.
In terms of sound and audio, Google Assist is, in our eyes, the platform which opens the most largest number of audio platform or content than any others. And we think that this is the best platform for audio. Of course, as a company, we are open to different platforms depending on the target user and the technology. But for audio, we think Google Assist is the best.
What about the competition? Because, of course, many could buy the Google Home speaker itself. Why do you think they will go towards Panasonic for the actual hardware?
Well, we have a very strong legacy in terms of audio technology, in terms of quality. For this speaker, we ask our best engineers, which are normally working for Technics or professional products, to design this speaker, having in mind the best, of course, sound quality, but as well the best human interface without any manual action. So that can be very useful for many customers.
How important do you think this product will be towards revenue? How important will the home appliances unit be for revenue across Panasonic in general?
Of course, we have a very wide range of products in our portfolio, but this product is a kind of new direction for the future, and I think we can address a very large, wide range of customers, from young, adult, or even blind customers, which cannot sometimes control their equipment. So by voice control or voice command, voice recognition, this is really an interesting new field to offer new services.
Talking about new fields, you've of course been pushing into battery technology significantly, particularly bringing that into the home. This is something that you've brought to Europe, Germany, Austria, the UK. How important is this becoming to your overall business model as well?
Well, storage battery technology is one of our core category, because currently our society goes for electrification. there is a huge pressure, as you know, on the CO2 emission reduction, onto pollution, controlling the global warming, and the only response to those challenges is moving towards electrification of the society. One interesting development is what we call self-consumption, where at your home you produce energy during daytime using photovoltaic, and then you store your energy onto batteries, then you reuse this energy during the evening or the nighttime, having a kind of autonomous system which brings a lot of benefit in terms of costs for consumption, but also avoiding pollution.
Talk to us about Europe, because interestingly you've partnered with Tesla on their Gigafactory in Reno in America, but you sit here as the head of Europe for Panasonic. Will we see some sort of Gigafactory being built on your territory?
Currently, our main investments have been focused in US, China and Japan. So in US with Tesla, China with other partners, and Japan as well. So we are currently discussing with car manufacturers for future development in Europe. But I have to say that today I cannot disclose any outcome, knowing that it will not be a short-term issue.
That was Panasonic Europe CEO Laurent Abadi. Now, coming up, does Hong Kong finally have its first unicorn? We look at the company that may have just surpassed a valuation of $1 billion. Next, this is Bloomberg. Hong Kong officially has its first unicorn. A merger between GoGoVan, it's a Hong Kong startup that's like a blend between Uber and a truck and trailer rental company, U-Haul, and it's merging with Alibaba-backed freight business 58 Suyan. GoGoVan CEO and co-founder Stephen Lam spoke earlier with Bloomberg's Yvonne Man in Hong Kong about, well, what makes this company so valuable.
We have a lot of business in China, and we have a lot of synergy by merging with Uber Suyan and 58 Suyan. That we shared a huge driver pool that reached more than 1 million drivers in China, that we can share our customer database, which is from B2B area, and they share their consumer database with us so that we can share one gigantic delivery network within China. That's where we have a lot of synergy, and then the valuation kind of hit 1 billion.
Did the company raise any new funds on this merger?
We are working on it right now, and we are very excited because you rarely see a company that have a Southeast Asia footprint which is growing really, really fast. And of course, we are the dominant player and the leader in China.
So have you gotten any kind of funding from VCs? Right now, I mean, how much are they putting in right now? I mean, how much has the company raised in total so far?
Well, in terms of Uber Suyan, they split off from 58 Home, which is supported by Alibaba, KKR, and Ping An as a major shareholder. And from GoGoVan, we raised several rounds of funding. Last round, we raised it from Alibaba, and then New Horizon, Singapore Press Holding, this major fund. So in terms of the total amount, I guess they raised over 300 million in 2015. In total for us, a little bit less than 50 million before.
So, Stephen, just fill us in on a few basics about the two companies. Part one, you are similar in what you do. How did you get involved in the startup, and just give us a sense of how much of China, how much of the business you actually have?
Okay, so how I got involved in startup, it's like just accidentally. I couldn't get a job after I graduated from Berkeley, and I moved back to Hong Kong. Then I just randomly started a business, ending up to be really, really successful here in Hong Kong. And then we expand in Southeast Asia and did an okay job. And in China, we grow gradually over time. By the time that last year, we were working with 58 Suyan on some business collaboration. And then we found out there's opportunity that we work together much closer to share the huge driver base instead of we build our own, and then we talk to our own customers with our own small driver pool, and then we share it. It will be really enjoying the sharing economy network and the efficiency. That's how we got to where we are today.
GoGo Vans CEO and co-founder Stephen Lamb. That does it for this edition of Bloomberg Technology. Have a great weekend. This is Bloomberg.